The Third Age, also known as the Fading Years, was the time of the rise of men and the waning of the Eldar. Many elves heeded the call of the Valar, but there were also those who chose to stay and resist the growing shadow of Sauron. Despite their dwindling numbers and inevitable fading, the remaining Elven realms fought alongside the other free peoples to usher in a new, prosperous Fourth Age. Being the oldest of the peoples of Ada, and possessing the most wisdom and military experience, many Eldar and their armies would prove crucial in the wars of the Third Age. Through their unique combination of wisdom, warfare, and magic, Elven armies contributed to the ultimate defeat of Sauron and his armies in the War for the Ring. After all the turbulence of the First and Second Ages, only 4 Elven realms survived into the Third Age. These were Lindon, Rivendell, Lothlórien, and the Woodland realm. Despite the depopulation of the Elven people, the 3 rings of power possessed by elfkind would greatly aid 3 of these realms, enabling the remaining Elven kingdoms to ward off the decay of time and preserve their domains as enclaves of peace and protection. During the days of flight, countless elves fled to Lindon before setting sail for Valinor, prompting King Gil-galad to maintain a power base there to defend the Grey Havens. After Gil-galad's fall in SA 3441, the remnants of Lindon's mostly Noldor population were ruled by Círdan, the Lord of the Havens. Lindon's geographical location kept her well out of harm's way, but this did not mean it pursued a policy of isolation. During the Angmar War, Lindon dispatched its small army on multiple occasions. Late in the 14th century of the Third Age, Lindon assisted Arveleg I and Cardolan in driving off the hillmen from the Weather Hills. During the 15th century, Lindon aided Arathor in repulsing Angmar's armies from Fornost and the North Downs. Centuries later, in TA 1851, Lindon once more rallied against the forces of Angmar and helped King Araval beat them back from his kingdom. Then, in TA 1975, Lindon sent her navy to Forakel in an unsuccessful attempt to rescue the last king of Arthedain, Arvedui. Lastly, in TA 1976, Lindon joined the host of the West to face Angmar at Fornost. During the battle, the armies of Angmar rushed to meet them, and seeing this, the Prince of Gondor sent his cavalry north into the hills of Evendim to ambush the overconfident foes. With this, the battle began, as the might of Angmar crashed into the Gondorian centre. This assault could have proved catastrophic if it was not for the battle-hardened lines of infantry who had repulsed the Wain Riders in the not-so-distant past. The fighting was brutal, with casualties beginning to mount on both sides. It is at this point the cavalry, sensing the pivotal moment in the battle, charged down from the hills, crashing into the rear of Angmar's line. The battle shifted immediately, with the surrounded warriors of Angmar falling in swathes. Realizing he was all but defeated, the Witch King attempted to retreat to the east. Yet he would earn no reprieve there, as the Elven hero Glorfindel led a second host from Rivendell up from the south. So, caught between a rock and a hard place, the army of the Witch King was utterly destroyed. After the downfall of Angmar, Lindon's military role in aiding the West came to an end. Therefore, her main purpose was to build ships for those elves seeking to sail for Valinor. Lindon had the second smallest military of the Elven realms, acting only in coalition with others. However, it made up for its dearth in manpower with its capable leadership. Even after the loss of King Gil-galad, Lindon retained one of the greatest rulers of Elvenkind in Círdan. Círdan had been the Lord of Falas during the First Age, and the Lord of the Grey afterwards. He was one of the oldest, wisest, and most foresighted elves of Middle-earth. With extensive military experience, going back to the wars of the First Age, Círdan was one of the most accomplished Elven generals of the Third Age. His gift of foresight saved Middle-earth on multiple occasions, and lent itself naturally to matters of war. Círdan preserved Lindon until TA 1000, whereupon the realm gradually shrank around the Grey Havens. Lindon had historically been a cosmopolitan elven city prior to the Third Age, taking refugees from Gondolin, Nargothrond, Hithlum, Doriath, and other elven realms. Elven veterans would have brought Lindon military knowledge, such as the Gondolindrim phalanx, Hithlum horseback archery, Noldorian heavy cavalry, and Doriathrin marchwarden tactics. However, Lindon's most defining military feature was not her ground forces, but her navy. Indeed, Círdan's shipwrights were unparalleled, capable of fielding landing craft that allowed her smaller army to deploy in fast and deadly amphibious assaults. During the Second Age, the Elves of Lindon produced some of the best weaponry and armor of the Second Age, albeit aided by Númenóreans and the dwarves of Khazad-dûm. These fine pieces of craftsmanship would survive into the Third Age. The armies of Lindon would forge weapons and armor of all manners: swords, axes, spears, bows, coats of mail armor, byrnies, hauberks, greaves, vambraces, helms and shields. Being mostly Noldor, the Elves of Lindon would most likely use the sword and shield, with some Gondolindrim veterans using perhaps maces, iron-studded clubs and slings. The Sylvans would use bows, and those of Nandor heritage wielded axes. Elves of all subraces were proficient with the spear, with King Gil-galad having famously wielded the legendary glaive Aiglos. By the Third Age, Rivendell had become a refuge and sanctuary, serving as the chief dwelling for the High Elves of Eriador. Its leader, Elrond, inherited Gil-galad's ring Vilya, which preserves Rivendell and protects it against the shadow of Sauron. Alongside its elven population, Rivendell also hosted the heirs of the human king Isildur, due to their kinship with the erstwhile Elrond. Unlike Lindon, Rivendell was well within reach of Angmar. During the reign of Arveli I, Rivendell was besieged by the Witch King, prompting Elrond to seek aid from Lindon and Lothlórien. After the collapse of Angmar, the first chieftain of the Dunedain, Aranath, took refuge at Rivendell. He brought with him heirlooms such as the shards of Narsil, the scepter of Anúminas, the star of Elendil, and scrolls on the history of Númenor. During the Second Age, Rivendell was chosen as the location to hold White Councils, whose decisions would shape the fate of Middle-earth. The first White Council decided that Rivendell should become the main stronghold of the elves in Eriador, rather than Eregion. The second of these conclaves appointed the White Wizard Saruman as the head of the council. The third White Council was called to vote upon an assault against Dol Guldur, and the fourth and final White Council was convened by Elrond and resulted in the formation of the famous Fellowship of the Ring. During the Third Age, Rivendell's population was the smallest of the Elven realms, and was likely unable to maintain a large standing army. Rivendell exerted military power not through its own armed forces, but by being the main military headquarters for the various alliances that Elrond helped forge. Elrond was one of the oldest and wisest among the elves, with extensive combat experience going back to the First Age. As a result of his millennia of military experience and wisdom, Elrond became one of the most respected leaders of the Third Age, with countless coming to him for war counsel. Despite feuding amongst the Free Folk, Elrond was able to navigate and coordinate efforts between many disparate nations with conflicting cultures and competing interests, something which was seen in his establishment of the Fellowship of the Ring. While Elrond did not have a sizable army, he did command a form of special forces led by Glorfindel and his sons, Elladan and Elrohir. Elrond dispatched Glorfindel to lead forces and act as a military advisor during the Battle of Fornost. Additionally, Glorfindel tracked down the ring-bearer Frodo Baggins and aided him on his journey. Elrond also dispatched his sons to scout the land and prepare the way for the Fellowship of the Ring to aid the Grey Company, counsel Aragorn to take the Paths of the Dead, aid in the assault of Pelargir, fight during the Battle of Pelennor Fields, and attack the Black Gate during the Last Debate. Despite Rivendell's small and fluctuating population, she was able to withstand the Siege of Angmar due to the power of Vilya. Vilya may have also amplified Elrond's power to control the Ford of Bruinen. By using his power, Elrond caused the ford to flood, saving Frodo Baggins from the Ringwraiths. Overall, the armed forces of Rivendell would have been identical to those of Lindon, albeit much smaller in size. Lothlórien and Greenwood the Great were first settled by the Nandor, who mixed with elements of the wandering Avari to become known as the Sylvan Elves. They were a hardy and valiant people, but one whom required wisdom and strength greater than they possessed. Following the destruction of Beleriand, some Eldar departed for Valinor, while others sought refuge in realms such as Lothlórien. During this movement of the Eldar, a Sindarin named Amdir came to Lothlórien, becoming its king. He was succeeded by his son Amroth, who inherited this title after Amdir's death during the Battle of Dagorled. Their people became known as the Galathrim and were majority Sylvan. In TA 1409, Amroth sent forces to contribute to the coalition against Angmar. Yet many Galathrim, such as Amroth's lover Nimrodel, disapproved of becoming involved in the wars of the Elves of the West. Consequently, many Galathrim migrated south to Elithond to set sail for Valinor. They were joined by Amroth, who drowned en route, leaving Lothlórien leaderless. The Galathrim then chose the Sindarin known as Celeborn and the Noldorian known as Galadriel to be their leaders. These two would henceforth be known as the Lord and Lady of Lórien. They established Caras Galadhon as the new capital of Lothlórien, and used the ring Nanya to preserve the realm and prevent the shadow from touching it. Celeborn and Galadriel shared their wisdom with the Galathrim, instructing them on the crafting of lembas bread, elven cloaks and elven rope, amongst other things. The two oversaw a prosperous realm, and had a daughter named Celebrian who married Elrond, forging a blood alliance with Rivendell. In TA 2510, Galadriel aided the Eotheod during the Battle of the Field of Celebrant by creating a great white mist that drove out the shadows of Dol Guldur. In TA 2941, Galadriel joined the assault on Dol Guldur, forcing Sauron to flee from Mordor. Despite this, Dol Guldur rose up again under the leadership of the Witch King of Angmar and later Camu. In TA 3019, when the Fellowship arrived at Caras Galadhon, a regiment of Galathrim border wardens used fiend voices and traps to ambush the orcs fording Nimrodel. That same year, Dol Guldur invaded Lothlórien thrice. During each attempt, the Galathrim border watchers utterly routed them, though there was much destruction along the borders of the wood. After the shadow fell on the 28th, Celeborn led a host of Galathrim across the Anduin on many boats to storm Dol Guldur. There, Galadriel threw down its walls, laid bare its pits, and cleansed Mirkwood. Thereafter, Thranduil and Celeborn formed Erin Lesgallen, dividing the lands between their people. During the Third Age, Lothlórien developed largely to counter the growth of Dol Guldur, with its fortress capital of Caras Galadhon being built specifically for that reason. Flets were built on the borders of Lothlórien, acting as guard posts and watchtowers, with those on the hill of Cerin Amroth built specifically to watch over Dol Guldur. Lothlórien's military consisted of border wardens, led by elves such as Haldir and his brothers Rumil and Orofin. These wardens were akin to the March Wardens of Doriath, excelling in guerrilla-style warfare. They concealed themselves in elven cloaks, used traps, and ambushed their enemies. The Galathrim predominantly used bows, and given Nandor heritage, some most likely used axes as well. The Galathrim were ill-equipped with armor and weapons compared to the Eldar of the West, depending on the element of surprise. Under the leadership of Celeborn and Galadriel, the Galathrim crafted bows strung with elven hair that was longer and stouter than that of Mirkwood. Legolas was able to shoot down a fell beast from the sky near the rapids of San Gabir using one of these bows. Together, Celeborn and Galadriel provided military leadership to the Galathrim forces. Celeborn led the Galathrim forces over the Anduin, and it seems likely he served as their general during the war with Dol Guldur. Galadriel, wielding Nenya, preserved Lothlórien and created a mirror using a basin filled with water from which one could see visions of the past, present and future. Much like Círdan, Galadriel had the gift of foresight to help direct the Galathrim. She also created a phial with the light of the Star of Eärendil reflected in the water of her mirror that aided Frodo and Sam on their quest. Much like Lothlórien, the elven realm of Mirkwood was founded by a Sindarin prince. This prince, named Orifer, departed Lindon in SA 750 with other Sindarin elves and came to Greenwood, becoming the lord of the region. Orifer built his halls at Amon Lank and called his land the Woodland realm. During the First and Second Ages, Orifer's people mingled with dwarves, Northmen, and later the Woodmen for trade and defense against orc raids. However, Orifer would migrate his people thrice to evade encroachment from Khazad-dûm, the intrusions of Celeborn and Galadriel, and the rising shadow of Sauron. Much like their Lothlórien cousins, the Woodland Elves were undisciplined, lightly armoured, and lightly armed. During the Battle of Daggalad, Orifer and Amdir rushed head-on against Gil-galad's orders, suffering tremendous casualties. Amdir and Orifer were slain due to this reckless insubordination, with 2/3 of the Woodland Elves perishing in battle. Orifer was succeeded by his son, King Thranduil. During the Third Age, though Greenwood's population declined, it remained the largest of the Elven realms. Thranduil maintained an isolationist policy, but never fully withdrew from trade or mingling with neighbouring realms. In TA 1050, Sauron returned disguised as a necromancer in the southern Greenwood. Without a ring of power to protect it from the touch of darkness, Greenwood was filled with fell beasts and great spiders, earning the name Mirkwood. Unable to preserve or protect against the shadow, Thranduil migrated his realm further northeast, bringing his people to an enchanted river which flowed black and carried a curse that caused any who came near it to fall into a long deep sleep. Using the cursed river for protection, Thranduil built the Elven King's halls underground with the aid of dwarfs in Menegroth's fashion. In TA 1941, Thranduil received word from birds that Smaug had been killed by Bard the Bowman. Believing Erebor's treasures were unguarded, Thranduil led a company of elves armed with spears and bows to claim the riches. This led the Woodland Elves to fight during the Battle of Five Armies in TA 2941. On the Elvish side were 1,000 highly competent and peerless Elven spearmen and swordsmen, supported by some 500 archers, and accompanied by 300 militiamen of Lake Town, led by Thranduil and Bard respectively. A battle almost ensued between both companies had it not been for the intervention of Gandalf, who informed them that innumerable hordes of goblins, led by Bolg, were now marching directly towards them, incited by previous hatreds alongside the slaying of the Great Goblin. Dane, Thranduil and Bard agreed that the oncoming host of orcs, wargs and bats, which outnumbered them massively, should be their core concern. The generals lined their forces at the spurs of the mountain, with the dwarves and men on the left and the elves on the right. A light rearguard was placed in between these two forces in order to entice the orcs to attack, allowing them to be encircled and destroyed. Bilbo attempted to sit out the battle on the Elven-held Ravenhill, where he was accompanied by Gandalf. The fighting ensued as the orcs and wargs crashed forward, with the bats supporting them like a sea of locusts. Initially, the allied plan worked perfectly, as the enemy vanguard rushed to the choke point in the center, taking massive losses. However, the sheer weight of numbers ensured this advantage was not held for long on the part of the allied forces. The second wave was far worse, with orcs scaling the sides of the spurs to attack the free folk from the side and rear, while the main wave engaged them from their initial starting point. The allies were hard pressed and were barely surviving the onslaught, and it seemed that the battle would soon be over. It was at this point a great shout went up from the Lonely Mountain. Thorin Oakenshield finally realized the folly of his ways and crashed forwards with his fellow companions. Their emergence upon the battlefield inspired the free folk. Their charge was so unexpected, and the weapons and armor uncovered within Erebor so effective, that the company pushed its way through the entirety of the Orcish center, rallying their faltering allies as they passed. Here, they eventually reached the monumentally sized bodyguards of Bolg, through whom they could not force their way. Battle lines and tactics soon devolved into an unorganized and chaotic melee, with no quarter being given on either side, and it seemed as if a stalemate had ensued, which would ultimately favor the orcs, who outnumbered the valorous of the dwarves, men and elves who stood together on that day. It was at this point Bilbo let out the cry, "The eagles are coming." Indeed, the Lord of the Great Eagles, Gwaihir, had led hundreds of his kind to aid the free folk in their desperate conflict, just as the tide had begun to turn against them. This shout was taken up by the entirety of the allied force, before Bilbo was unfortunately knocked unconscious by a stray rock to the head. The battle began to swing finally in favour of the free folk, as the eagles decimated the Orcish lines in swooping manoeuvres, relieving much of the pressure placed upon both spurs and Thorin in the centre. However, the engagement, that would later be called the Battle of the Five Armies, was truly won when Bjorn arrived in his form of a bear of gargantuan size and crashed into the goblin kind. Just at this point, Thorin attempted to break through and slay Bolg, but was mortally wounded in the attempt. Bjorn, seeing this, brushed through the Orcish lines in order to carry Thorin's broken body to safety. Seeing the wounded king under the mountain and further enraged by it, Bjorn returned to the fray, filled with wrath and seeking vengeance. He smashed the ranks of Bolg's bodyguards before slaying the mighty orc himself in single combat, destroying the morale of the orcs, who were left as easy pickings for the battered but unbroken free folk to decimate. Panicking and scattering, they were slaughtered en masse, with many more losing their lives in Mirkwood as Thranduil's people showed them no mercy. On March 21st of TA 3018, Gandalf and Aragorn delivered Gollum to Thranduil as a prisoner. Then on June 20th, Sauron sent orcs to attack the Woodland realm, hoping a raid would provide a distraction to allow Gollum to escape Thranduil's prison. In the wake of the attack, Thranduil dispatched his son Legolas to Rivendell to become a member of the Fellowship. On March 15th of TA 3019, Dol Guldur began the battle under the trees. Much of the woods were burned, but Thranduil's people were ultimately victorious. As showcased during the Battle of Five Armies, Thranduil was a capable general and able to coordinate other armies. He arranged his archers wielding bows upon a spur and created a light rearguard to lure the enemy to a choke point between the two spurs. The Woodland Elves kept the enemy at bay as spearmen, most likely in a shoulder-to-shoulder formation. Given Legolas's white knife, it is reasonable to deduce that the Elves of Mirkwood used knives as secondary weapons. The Elves of Mirkwood used bows, most likely made of yew, shorter and less stout than those of the Galadriel. Lindon, Rivendell and Lothlórien survived the Wars of the Third Age, aided in great part by their rings of power, while the Woodland realm relied on its greater numbers, isolationism and migration. Despite men taking the military center stage, Elven armies of the Third Age lended their vast military experience, wisdom and leadership to defeat Sauron. The victory would be bittersweet, as the One Ring's destruction caused the three Elven rings to lose their power, and thus the Elves were forced to heed the call of Valinor or allow their spirits to fade. More videos on the societies and militaries of Middle-earth are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.